You can forgive almost anyone, except the person wearing your face. Carl Jung named the worst mental trap a person who feels too much can fall into. It runs on a mechanism you have never been shown. Someone you love fails, and you offer them grace without thinking. You fail, and a courtroom opens behind your eyes. The same depth of feeling that rescues everyone else quietly drowns you. Before this is over, you will understand the machine you are caught in. You will see why the relentless voice in your head has felt like a conscience, and what it actually is underneath. You will learn the difference between guilt and shame, and why the person who feels too much drowns in one while believing it is the other. You will meet the mask you built out of goodness itself, and the prison you raised around your own flaws. And you will find the one act Carl Jung called the hardest thing a feeling person will ever attempt. Because somewhere inside you, a self you walled away to stay safe is still breathing behind the brick. The way out was never to feel less. It was to turn the instrument around. Let me show you the room where the trial is held. It is 3 a.m. The house is silent in that particular way. Only the middle of the night is silent. A silence with weight to it. You are not in crisis. Nothing has happened. And then, without warning, your mind reaches back 10 years and pulls out a single sentence. Something you said to a parent. A relationship you stayed in long after it had started to rot. A moment you fell short in front of someone whose opinion mattered. You do not simply remember it. Your body flinches. There is a sudden flush of heat across your chest and up into your throat. Your stomach drops the way it would if you had just been caught. You are lying perfectly still in a dark room, and you are having a full physical reaction to an event that ended a decade ago. You are relitigating a closed case at full emotional resolution. And this is the part almost no one names. You do not merely remember the failure, you resentence yourself with it. You take the memory and you file it, once again, as evidence. Not evidence of a hard season, or a younger self, or a human being doing the best they could with what they had. Evidence of what you fundamentally, permanently are. That is not memory. That is a verdict, reread aloud to an audience of one every single night. This is what we are going to walk through together. First, 2 inner states that feel identical from the inside, but are not the same thing at all, and why you keep mistaking the one that can free you for the one that is slowly burying you. Second, where that nightly voice truly comes from, and why it has worn the costume of a conscience so convincingly that you never once thought to put it on trial. And third, what Carl Jung places on the far side of the single door you have spent your whole life refusing to open. Stay with me. By the end of this, the voice that runs you at 3 a.m. is going to sound very different. Let's begin with the thing in your body. Because shame is not a thought. This is the first mistake everyone makes, and it is the reason nothing they've tried has worked. You cannot out-argue shame because shame does not arrive as an argument. It arrives as a climate. It is the sudden weight in the chest, the flinch before a memory has even finished surfacing, the burning in the throat at 3 a.m. It moves through the nervous system faster than language. This is why the rational approach fails you. You have sat yourself down, laid out the evidence, proven point by point that the thing was not entirely your fault, and walked away from that internal courtroom having won every argument and felt no different. Because you were arguing with the weather. You were reading a legal brief to a thunderstorm. So let's name the 2 things precisely, because the difference is everything. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame says, I am the mistake. Guilt is about behavior. It points at a specific act, and it can be addressed. You can repair it, apologize, make it right, and set it down. Guilt has an exit. Guilt is, in its own painful way, useful. It is the psyche keeping you aligned with your own values. Shame has no exit because shame is not about what you did. It is about what you are, and you cannot apologize your way out of being. You cannot make amends for existing. So the person caught in shame does the only thing the structure allows. They serve a life sentence with no chance of parole for the crime of being themselves. And the person who feels too much is uniquely, almost surgically, built to drown in it. Here is why. You spent your whole life reading the emotional undercurrent of other people. It is your oldest skill. Before you could name it, you could feel the temperature shift when a parent walked into a room. The micro expressions, the tightening around the eyes, the particular quality of a silence. You learn to track the inner state of everyone near you, because very often your safety as a child depended on it. But that same antenna picks up something it was never meant to internalize. It picks up you are not enough, from a parent who was overwhelmed, from a world that rewarded performance and punished need. And because your instrument is so sensitive, you did not hear that as an opinion or file it as one data point among many. You received it as a certainty. You took the unspoken mood of the people around you and turned it into a law of your own nature. This is what I mean when I say you have outsourced the verdict. Most people carry the judge inside themselves, an internal sense of worth that holds reasonably steady regardless of the room. But you, because you feel everyone so acutely, relocated the judge's bench outside your own body. You handed it to other people, and so every opinion of you lands not as feedback, but as a ruling. A stranger's coolness becomes a sentence. A friend's distracted reply becomes evidence. You find yourself working to win the approval of people you do not even like, because your internal baseline is set, permanently, to guilty, and you are desperate for anyone at all to overturn it. And here Jung gives us the structure underneath all of it. The persona. The persona, Jung wrote, is the mask we wear to meet the world, the face we present, the role we play. Through the persona, he said, a man tries to appear as this or that. It is normal. Everyone has one. It is how we function. But Jung named the precise danger too. The danger, he said, is that we become identical with our personas. The mask fuses to the face until we no longer know where the performance ends and the person begins. For most people, the persona is a social tool. For the person who feels too much, it became something far more dangerous. It became goodness itself. You did not just build a mask. You built an identity as the helper, the reliable one, the one who never causes harm, who absorbs the discomfort so no one else has to, who would rather carry a thing alone than be a burden. You made goodness your survival strategy. And here is the trap inside the trap. When goodness is the mask you wear to be safe, then any ordinary human inevitable flaw does not feel like a flaw. It feels like exposure, like the real defective thing behind the mask is about to slip out and be seen. And shame is the alarm system, the violent full-body siren that goes off the instant your actual, imperfect self threatens to show through the goodness. The flush of heat is the alarm. The flinch is the alarm. The 3 a.m. replay is the alarm, sounding again over a flaw you exposed 10 years ago, as if the mask is still slipping, right now, in the dark. You have been calling that alarm your conscience. It is not your conscience. But to understand what it actually is, we have to look at the part of you it was built to keep hidden. But the reason you cannot simply set this heavy thing down, the reason every gentle suggestion to just forgive yourself slides right off you, is that you have fundamentally misnamed what you are holding. You believe the shame is load-bearing. Sit with the actual fear for a moment because you have probably never said it out loud. If I forgive myself, I will become a monster. If I loosen my grip on myself even slightly, I will turn into the selfish, careless, harmful person I have spent my whole life refusing to be. My shame is the only thing keeping me honest. The self-punishment is not the disease. It is the medicine. It is the one rule I cannot afford to relax. This is the most important misunderstanding in the entire trap. Your self-hatred is not what makes you a good person. It never was. Consider the inverse for a moment. the person who genuinely lacks a conscience, the one who can harm without cost, who feels no flush of heat in the throat, no 3 a.m. tribunal, nothing. That person is not free. That person has a dial that does not turn. The needle is stuck at 0, and no amount of damage will move it. Now look at yourself. Your dial is not broken in the other direction. Your dial works. It works so well that you have pinned it past the red line, held it there with both hands, and let the machine smoke and scream, and then looked at the smoke and called it virtue. You looked at a system in violent overload and named it being good. That is not conscience. A working conscience informs you and then lets you go. It says that was beneath you and releases you to do better. What you have is a conscience that has malfunctioned into permanent self-prosecution and then disguised the malfunction as morality, so you would never think to question it. And now Jung gives us the name for what is actually happening, and it is going to be uncomfortable because it is the exact opposite of how you have always seen yourself. Inflation. Jung used the word inflation to describe an expansion of the personality beyond its proper limits, a state in which the ego swells past its real human size. We usually picture inflation as grandiosity of light. The person who thinks they are chosen, gifted, destined, superior, the ego puffed up with its own importance. But Jung understood that inflation has a shadow twin. There is a grandiosity of darkness as well, and it looks exactly like humility, to believe that you are uniquely responsible, uniquely guilty, uniquely beyond the reach of the forgiveness you extend so freely to everyone else. That is not humility. That is negative inflation. It is the ego refusing its ordinary human size and choosing instead to be the singular central figure in a private universe of fault. Think about what you are actually claiming when you refuse to forgive yourself. You are claiming to be the one exception. Billions of people make mistakes and are still, somehow, allowed to be people, but not you. You have placed yourself outside the entire human category. You have decided that the rules of grace, the rules you apply to everyone else, do not apply to your case, because your case is special. Your fault is bigger. That is not smallness. That is a strange, inverted enormousness. You have made yourself the protagonist of a cosmic trial, the most guilty, the least forgivable, the one whose ordinary human errors are somehow load-bearing for the moral order of the world. Your relentless self-judgment is not humility. It is a secret, dark grandiosity. You have made yourself the center of a private universe of fault. And it began, long ago, as the only solution to an impossible childhood equation. If I am the problem, then maybe I have the power to fix it. The inflation was protection. If everything was your fault, then nothing was random and nothing was helpless. But the child's solution has become the adult's prison, and the wall you built to hold it all in is about to become the most important thing in this entire story. Before we go further, one question. Answer it in the comments, not in your head, where the tribunal still gets to edit the transcript. What is the verdict about yourself you have never once let yourself overturn? Not the whole story. The single sentence you have been rereading at 3 a.m, leave it below. You will see very quickly that you were never the only one carrying it. Therefore, you build a wall. If shame is the alarm, and the alarm goes off whenever the real self slips out from behind the mask of goodness, then the obvious strategy, the one you have been executing your whole adult life without ever deciding to, is simple. Never let the real self out. Wall it in. Organize your entire existence around not being the person your shame insists you secretly are. Let me introduce you to someone. Call him the man who fixes everything. He is 47. He is, by every external measure, the steadiest person in any room. He is the one people call when it falls apart. He holds his family together. He holds his job together. He is competent in a way that looks almost effortless. And he has never, not once, let the important things drop. and privately his entire life is a performance stage to outrun a ledger. Because he keeps one, a running account, updated nightly, of every person he has ever let down, every version of himself he failed to become, every moment he fell short, filed and available for review at 3 a.m. To everyone watching, he is the rock. Inside, he feels like a fraud one mistake away from finally being exposed. And so he never stops moving, never stops fixing, never stops proving, because the moment he stops, the ledger gets the floor. The wall he built to keep the shame out is working, and it is the exact same wall that has kept his entire life the size of a coffin. This is the part the self-help language can never reach, because it sounds like strength. From the outside, he looks like a man who has it together. But the competence is not freedom. It is the shape of the cage. Every brick he laid to keep the flawed, unacceptable self locked away is a brick that also walled out spontaneity, walled out rest, walled out the possibility of being loved for who he actually is, rather than for what he reliably does. He built a fortress to keep the monster in, and realized, too late, that he was in there with it, in a space no larger than a body. Jung had a word for this region of the psyche, the shadow. I have led you into the shadow in earlier videos, but never through this particular door. The shadow is the self you disowned in order to become acceptable. Everything that got punished out of you early and so went into hiding. The rage you were never permitted. The neediness you were trained to find embarrassing. The appetite, the envy, the ordinary greed of being a living person, all of it swept off the stage and locked in a back room because it contradicted the role you were playing. Jung defined it plainly. The inferior part of the personality, the sum of all those things, including the intentional repression of painful thoughts and feelings that we could not bear to hold in the light. And here's the law that the man who fixes everything has never been told. You cannot integrate what you condemn. The parts of yourself you have judged and banished do not disappear when you exile them. This is the great illusion. You imagine shame is keeping the bad self gone. It is not. It cannot. Nothing in the psyche is ever truly thrown away. What you exile through shame goes underground and runs you from below. The very flaws you refuse to look at are the ones now steering unseen from the basement. By condemning your shadow, you did not destroy it. You handed it the wheel. The alchemists had a name for this stage. The nigredo, a darkening in which the material breaks down and decays into what looks like pure rot before it can become anything new. They believed nothing could be transformed until it had first passed through that blackness. And Jung saw the nigredo for what it psychologically is, the confrontation with the shadow, the descent into the parts of yourself you have spent a lifetime refusing to see. The trouble is, you have mistaken the nigredo for your permanent address. You think the blackening is you. You think the descent is a life sentence rather than a passage. And this is what gives the 3 a.m. memory its terrible charge. You have wondered why it keeps coming back. Why that specific failure replays year after year, when you would give anything to be free of it. You assume it returns to punish you. It does not. The shame is the battery, what gives the memory its electricity. But the reason it keeps surfacing is something else entirely. The psyche is trying to give it back to you. The memory replays because the part of yourself you exiled in that moment is knocking on the door, asking to be let in. The repetition is not punishment. It is the unconscious, with infinite patience, presenting the same exiled fragment again and again, waiting for the night you finally stop prosecuting it and start integrating it. The loop does not end when you finally win the trial. The loop ends when you withdraw from the trial entirely, which brings us to the exact mechanism that breaks it. So here is the reveal. The thing the whole structure was built to hide from you. The self-judgment was never your conscience. It was shame, defending the persona, the alarm system protecting the mask of goodness. the gatekeeper at the entrance to the shadow, making sure the exiled parts of you could never come home. And the entire apparatus, the tribunal, the ledger, the 3 a.m. trial, was doing exactly one thing the whole time, with perfect efficiency. It was keeping you out of your own life. Every ounce of energy spent prosecuting yourself was energy not spent living as yourself. The wall did not protect you from the monster. There was no monster. The wall protected the shame, and it cost you the only thing you ever actually had, the unrepeatable experience of being the person you really are, flaws and all, while you are still here to be it. And now Jung asks something of you that is going to sound, at first, almost offensively simple, and then when you feel its full weight, almost impossible. In his essay Psychotherapists or the Clergy, Jung wrote one of the most quietly devastating passages in all of his work. He said, "The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life. That I feed the beggar, that I forgive an insult, that I love my enemy in the name of Christ, all these are undoubtedly great virtues. But what if I should discover that the least amongst them all, the poorest of all the beggars, the most impudent of all the offenders, the very enemy himself, that these are within me, and that I myself stand in need of the alms of my own kindness." Read that again, slowly, and feel where it lands in your body, because you already know how to do the hard part. You feed the beggar. You forgive the insult. You love the enemy. You extend grace so naturally you do not even experience it as effort. You are, by any honest measure, extraordinarily good at the very thing Jung calls the height of moral virtue. You have simply decided that there is one beggar you will let starve, one enemy you will never forgive, one person, the one wearing your face, who stands outside the reach of the kindness you give away to everyone else, freely, every single day. This is why Jung called self-acceptance the essence of the moral problem. Not a footnote, not a nice addition once the real work is done. The essence, because anyone can be generous to a stranger. The terrifying part, the part that exposes whether your grace is real or just another performance of goodness, is the moment you discover that the most impudent offender is you, and you have to decide whether your mercy was ever actually mercy or just a way to be liked. Jung said, near the end of his life, that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not the most pleasant, not the most relaxing, the most terrifying. He understood exactly what he was asking. He knew that for the person who built their whole identity on the prosecution, dropping the case feels less like relief and more like annihilation. Because who are you if you are not the one keeping yourself in line? So let me show you who you are on the other side of it. The contrast, precisely, so you can feel the difference between the two lives. The person still inside the trap apologizes for needing anything at all. They replay a 10-year-old mistake as though the verdict is still pending, as though the jury might this time finally come back. They overrule every compliment the moment it arrives, because a compliment is inadmissible evidence in a court that has already decided. They feel everything and file every feeling as evidence against themselves. The person who has withdrawn the shame is not a different person. This is the part that matters. They did not become numb. They did not stop feeling. They still remember everything. The same sentence, the same relationship, the same moment they fell short. They feel it all with the same depth they always have. The sensitivity did not go anywhere. The instrument is just as fine. They have simply stopped filing each feeling as evidence against themselves. They have stopped being the defendant. That is the entire transformation, not less feeling. The same feeling, no longer weaponized. The same memory no longer entered into the record of a trial that never should have been convened. And self-acceptance in Jung's sense was never indulgence. It was never letting yourself off the hook so you could go and do harm. It is the precise opposite. It is the absolute prerequisite for individuation, for becoming a single continuous person, rather than the warden and the prisoner you have split yourself into, one performing goodness in the daylight while the other waits in the cell below. You cannot become whole while half of you is on trial. You must become the benefactor of your own internal beggar. You must extend the alms of your own kindness to the one person you constructed your entire identity to prosecute, not because the failures did not happen, because you too are within the category of those who deserve grace, and you have been quietly, ruinously treating yourself as the lone exception. And when you do this, when the shame is finally withdrawn, the 3 a.m. memory does not disappear. I want to be honest with you, because false promises are their own kind of cruelty. The memory remains. You will still remember, but it loses its teeth, it surfaces, and your body does not flinch. The heat does not rise in your throat. It becomes what it always should have been, a thing that happened in a life that is still being lived by a person who is allowed to have a past. You remember more, and it stops hurting. So think back to the very beginning, to that friend, the one who came to you shattered, the one you would forgive in a heartbeat, the one you would never let define themselves by their worst moment. You are that friend. You always were. The whole time you were searching for someone generous enough to forgive the unforgivable thing, you were standing in front of the mirror, withholding from yourself the one thing you have never once withheld from anyone else. The person who feels too much was never broken by their depth of feeling. Hear that clearly, because you have been told the opposite your whole life. Your sensitivity is not the wound. The feeling is not the flaw. You were broken by what you did with it when you turned it inward and called the cruelty conscience. And the way out is not to feel less. It was never to feel less. The way out is to perform the single act you have spent a lifetime treating as forbidden. To take the vast, unreasonable grace you pour into the whole world and finally, for once, turn the instrument around. So forgive yourself, almost aggressively, not quietly, not someday, not once you have suffered enough to earn it, because you will never decide you have suffered enough. The court does not work that way. Forgive yourself almost aggressively, not because your past mistakes did not happen, but because they do not get to own your future forever. The trial is over. It was always over. You were the only one who never got the ruling. You are free to go. If this names something you have carried for years without language, leave it below. One line. The sentence you would offer that friend from the very beginning, turned around and finally said to yourself, someone scrolling these comments needs to read it, and to know they are not the only one who has lived inside the tribunal.
Turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.